May is the month most gardeners completely underestimate, and it's exactly why their harvest never really takes off. While people are still waiting around for the right time, the soil is already warm, the days are already long, and the fastest crops in the world are basically begging to be planted right now. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you 9 vegetables you can sow in May that will go from seed to harvest in as little as 25 to 60 days, and some of them will keep producing right through the entire season if you handle them right. This is Seed to Harvest, where we focus on turning simple garden spaces into real, continuous food production. And here's how this is going to work. I'll walk you through each vegetable in order, starting with the fastest growers and building up to the heavy producers that will carry your garden into summer and beyond. Pay attention to the timing on each one, because the real advantage in May isn't just what you plant, it's how quickly you can turn that space over and keep it producing. By the end, you'll know exactly what to put in the ground this week, so you're not watching the best part of the growing season slip by unused. Let's get started. Vegetable number 1, radishes. Vegetable number 1 is the fastest payoff you can get in a garden, and honestly one of the most satisfying to grow if you like quick results. Radishes don't ask for much at all. You drop the seeds straight into the soil, give them consistent moisture, and before you even have time to overthink it, they're already swelling underground and pushing those bright green tops into view. In about 3 to 4 weeks, depending on the variety and conditions, you're pulling something out of the ground that actually looks like it belongs in a market display, not a backyard bed. What makes radishes so powerful in May is how quickly they reset your garden space. The moment you harvest them, that same patch is ready for something else, which means you're not just growing food, you're cycling production. You can stagger plantings every couple of weeks and keep a steady supply going instead of one big harvest and then nothing. The key is timing, though, because as temperatures climb, radishes shift from crisp and mild to woody and sharp faster than most beginners expect. Plant them now while the soil is still cool enough to give you that clean, crunchy result that actually makes them worth growing in the first place. Vegetable number 2, lettuce. Vegetable number 2 is one of those crops that quietly does a lot more than people give it credit for. Lettuce grows fast, responds quickly to harvesting, and doesn't demand perfect conditions to get started, which makes it one of the most reliable things you can plant in May. Once those seeds are in the soil, you'll start seeing usable leaves in just a few weeks, especially if you're harvesting them young instead of waiting for full heads. The real advantage here is that lettuce doesn't force you into a single harvest moment. It lets you keep coming back to the same plant over and over. If you manage it right, lettuce turns into a continuous food source instead of a one-time crop. You can cut the outer leaves and let the center keep growing, which stretches a single planting far longer than most beginners expect. In May, it also fits perfectly into the transition season because it grows fast enough to finish before the real summer heat takes over and ruins the texture. Once temperatures climb, lettuce can turn bitter and bolt quickly. So the goal is to take full advantage of this window while the weather is still mild. Plant it now, keep it slightly shaded if the sun gets intense, and you'll get a steady supply of fresh greens without needing to replant constantly. Vegetable number 3. Arugula. Vegetable number 3 is where things start to get a little more interesting because arugula isn't just fast-growing, it actually changes the way your garden tastes. From the moment it sprouts, it moves quickly, filling in bare soil with soft green leaves that are ready to harvest in just over a month. You don't need to baby it or overcomplicate it either. Scatter the seeds, keep the soil lightly moist, and it practically handles the rest on its own. What you get at the end isn't just another leafy green. It's something with character, a peppery bite that shows up immediately the moment you eat it. The real advantage with arugula in May is how well it fits into tight growing windows. It thrives while temperatures are still moderate, but it doesn't hold back production while things warm up, which means you can squeeze multiple harvests out of a single planting if you keep picking it young. The more you harvest, the more it pushes out new growth, which turns one small patch into a repeated supply system instead of a single-use crop. Once summer heat really locks in, it will try to bolt and shift flavor,
so the timing here is everything. Get it started now, and you'll have a steady, fresh ingredient that keeps showing up in your kitchen long before most slow crops are even close to ready. Vegetable number 4, Swiss chard. Vegetable number 4 is one of those crops that looks like it belongs in a flower garden before it ever looks like food, and that's exactly why it surprises people when they realize how productive it actually is. Swiss chard grows fast in its early stages, and even before it fully matures, you can start picking tender leaves that work perfectly in salads, sautés, or just as a steady green addition to whatever you're cooking. Once it's established, it doesn't behave like a one-and-done crop either. It keeps pushing out new leaves from the center, which means one planting can feed you for weeks without needing to be replaced. What makes Swiss chard especially useful in a May garden is its ability to keep performing even as conditions start to shift towards summer heat. Where crops like lettuce start to struggle, chard just keeps going, maintaining both color and texture while still producing new growth. The stems alone can become a feature in the garden, especially varieties with bright reds, yellows, and oranges. But the real value is in how dependable it is once it gets going. If you want something that fills space, looks good, and keeps giving back without constant replanting, this is one of the most stable choices you can put in the ground right now.
Vegetable number 5, spinach. Vegetable number 5 is one of those crops that earns its place in a May garden by moving quickly when conditions are still on its side. Spinach doesn't need much encouragement to get started, and once it germinates, it builds usable leaves faster than most people expect. You can begin harvesting young leaves in just a few weeks, and the best part is that you don't have to take the whole plant at once. Pick what you need, and it keeps pushing out new growth from the center, which turns a small patch into a repeated supply instead of a single harvest moment. The real timing advantage with spinach is that it thrives in the cool to mild window that May still offers before the heat becomes dominant. As temperatures rise, spinach naturally tries to shift its energy into flowering, which changes both texture and taste, so the goal is to get as much production as possible before that switch happens. If you plant it now and stay consistent with harvesting, you can pull multiple rounds from the same bed before it eventually winds down for the season. And once it does, that same space becomes perfect for a follow-up crop, which is where smart succession planting really starts to show its value. Vegetable number 6, green onions, scallions. Vegetable number 6 is one of the simplest plants you can grow, but also one of the most useful once it gets going. Green onions don't take up much space, they don't demand much attention, and they don't really care if you're an experienced gardener or just getting started. You can plant them close together in tight rows, or even tuck them into gaps between other crops, and they'll still grow steadily without competing too aggressively. From seed or sets, they come up fast, and before long, you've got usable greens ready to trim and bring into the kitchen. What makes green onions especially valuable in a May garden is how forgiving they are when it comes to harvesting. You don't always have to pull the whole plant. If you cut them carefully above the base, they can regrow and give you another round of harvests, which stretches a single planting much further than most people expect. That kind of repeat growth turns them into a steady background crop rather than something you plant, harvest once, and forget about. They also handle changing conditions well, staying productive through warmer weeks as long as they're watered consistently. It's the kind of crop that quietly keeps giving without demanding much in return, which is exactly what makes it so useful when the rest of the garden starts getting busy. Vegetable number 7, bush beans. Vegetable number 7 is where the garden shifts from quick leafy harvests into real heavy production, and bush beans are one of the best examples of that transition. These plants don't waste time once the soil is warm enough. You plant them in May, and they move through their early growth stage quickly, building a compact structure before they start producing clusters of pods. What makes them especially appealing is how straightforward they are. No trellis, no complicated setup, just a solid planting that turns into a steady stream of harvestable beans within a couple of months. Once bush beans get into production, they don't just give you a single burst and stop. They keep producing as long as you keep harvesting, which means the more you pick, the more they respond. That's what makes them so valuable in a May planting window. You're essentially setting yourself up for a mid to late summer food source that doesn't require constant replanting or heavy maintenance. On top of that, they improve the soil as they grow by fixing nitrogen, which means the space they occupy actually becomes better for whatever you plant next. It's one of those crops that pulls double duty without you needing to think about it too much, which is exactly why it belongs in a productive garden plan this time of year. Vegetable number 8, zucchini, summer squash. Vegetable number 8 is the one that can completely change how productive your garden feels in just a few weeks. Zucchini grows with a kind of confidence that's almost aggressive once it gets established. You put it in warm soil in May, and it doesn't sit around deciding what to do next. It pushes out big leaves, builds strong stems, and before long you start seeing flowers turning into fruit faster than most people are prepared for. This is not a slow crop, and it definitely doesn't behave politely once it gets going. The real shift happens when the first harvest starts, because that's when zucchini turns from a plant you're watching into a plant you're actively managing. If you keep picking it young, around 6 to 8 inches, it responds by producing even more, almost like it's trying to keep up with you. Leave it too long and it gets oversized quickly, which is why timing matters more here than almost anywhere else on this list. 1 or 2 healthy plants can easily keep a household supplied through peak season, which is why May planting is so important. You're essentially giving it the longest possible runway before summer hits full stride, and that's when it really starts to show what it can do.
Vegetable number 9, cucumbers. Vegetable number 9 is the final one on this list, and it's also one of the most satisfying once it starts producing. Cucumbers are fast movers in warm soil, and May is really the point where everything lines up for them to take off properly. Once they're in the ground and temperatures stay steady, they quickly shift from small vines to aggressive climbers that start reaching for support almost immediately. Give them something to climb and a bit of consistent moisture, and they'll reward you with steady growth that doesn't slow down once it finds its rhythm. What makes cucumbers especially valuable is how quickly they turn flowers into harvestable fruit once the plant matures. You're not waiting endlessly once production starts, because they tend to set fruit in cycles, meaning regular picking actually encourages more growth. If you let them sit too long on the vine, the plant slows down, so the goal is consistent harvesting to keep things moving. In a May planting window, you're also giving cucumbers enough time to build strong vines before peak summer heat kicks in, which is when they really hit full productivity. Done right, they become one of the most reliable crops for continuous harvesting right through the hottest part of the season. And that's the full list of 9 vegetables you can plant right now in May that will actually give you a real harvest while the season is still moving. What ties all of these together is simple timing. May isn't just another planting month. It's the window where fast crops and long producers overlap, giving you the chance to harvest early greens while setting up heavier crops that carry you into summer. If you use this period well, your garden stops being random and starts becoming a steady cycle of food coming in week after week. The real difference isn't just what you plant, it's how quickly you act on it. Even picking just 2 or 3 of these and getting them in the ground this week will put you ahead of most gardens that are still sitting in planning mode. So start small, get something growing, and let momentum build from there. If this helped, subscribe to Seed to Harvest for more practical growing guides that focus on real results from real soil. And drop a comment telling me which of these you're planting first.